Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this series, which is brought to you with generous support from Taylor and Francis, we're going to be talking about open research and how libraries can play an important role in supporting it. Farther upstream than open access, open research is a collaborative, transparent research workflow. As open access strives to make accessibility to scientific output more universal, open research works in a similar way with the research process itself. And lately, libraries are finding that they can occupy a unique role in providing services for their research communities, such as informatics, data management, and navigating reproducibility requirements. My guests for the next 4 episodes include Natya Hans, Informatics and Reproducibility Librarian, Academic Research and Consulting Services Department at the University of Florida, Emily McElroy, Vice President of Academic Relations at Taylor and Francis, and Jamie Hutchins, Director of Open Research Americas at Taylor and Francis. In this first episode, we meet our guests and learn more about the open research process and opportunities academic libraries have to provide support for it. Okay, Emily, Natya, and Jamie, welcome to the program. So let's start with introductions. Can each of you just briefly introduce yourselves and describe your current jobs and area of expertise or research? Natya, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Natya Hans. I'm currently the Informatics and Reproducibility Librarian in Academic Research, Consulting and Services Department at University of Florida. And I've been in this role for about 2 years now. I got my PhD at University of Florida in computational evolutionary biology, with my research mostly focused on the areas of phylogenetics, molecular evolution, and bioinformatics. So as you can see, I'm coming from a non-traditional library role into librarianship.
Excellent. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that a little later, Natya. So Emily, let's move over to you.
Sure. I'm currently the Vice President of Academic Relations for Taylor and Francis. I've been a librarian for 25 years, working in various roles and institutions. I've held positions ranging from interlibrary loan assistant to collections librarian, associate dean, and dean of libraries. I've worked closely with many research offices, and I recently made the move to Taylor and Francis.
Excellent. And Jamie.
Hi, Bill. Yes, I'm Jamie Hutchins. So I'm the Director for Open Research in the Americas for Taylor and Francis. I'm 25 years as a publisher, so I've worked multiple roles now in both for-profit and non-profit publishers, obviously with Taylor and Francis now, but I've worked also in the publishing side of the business. I started in peer review. I moved through various sort of management roles where I was running the publishing departments for a couple of different non-profits, and then I've recently moved more into what we think of as a commercial role, but really it's around developing partnerships with the library community and helping them to work with us to navigate through the transition to open access and open research.
Right. Yeah, I should say welcome back to the program, actually, Jamie. Last time you were here, we were talking about Taylor and Francis's Subscribe to Open project.
That's right. Thanks for inviting me back.
Sure. Just sticking with you for a moment, Jamie, I'm wondering if you could just, for those who may not be familiar, could you just explain to our listeners the difference between open access and what we'll really be talking about here, open research? How do the goals of each of those differ?
Yeah, it's a big question, actually, in many ways. So it's a sort of fundamental question that's going on right now. There are a few sort of caveats I probably should say now as well. My focus on open research is one of the ways that TNF pulls together our various functions around open access and more broadly the open research agenda. So we quite often throw that phrase in, and it can mean several different things, which can obviously lead to some confusion for people out there. But really, we prefer the term open research because we believe it's more inclusive of all the disciplines that we work with. But some of the people listening to the podcast may have heard phrases like open science and open scholarship, and they're loosely used in parallel with each other. But the main thing, the differentiation between science and research, that's something that's very culturally relevant, I think, within the English language speaking communities. That differentiation doesn't necessarily exist in other languages. So science is research and research is science. So maybe it's just like a definition we don't really need to make, but I think it is important for us just to get the right basis for the conversation.
Mm.
The key concepts of open research really are around building transparency, inclusivity, I can't even say it, inclusivity and reproducibility into research. Whereas open access is a central concept within open research, but it's primarily focused on the availability of research outputs. And it does contribute to the open research as its broader definition. But it's a sort of sub-part, if you like, of open research. There are much broader concepts around open research that we're all sort of focusing on. There are a number of different definitions that we work with, probably the ones that people will be, or hopefully are aware of. UNESCO has a definition of open science, which I think is nice. It talks really about the changes to the scientific process, making it more transparent, more democratic. They also talk about open science as being a critical way of accelerating progress towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is something of a focus for us at Taylor & Francis as well. There are other institutions that I think people will know about. There's a European institution called Foster Open Science, which has a broader definition, which focuses on things like collaboration, contribution, making sure that things like research data, lab notes, and research processes are freely available. NASA also launched something last year. So in the year of open science, they had an initiative called TOPS, it's Transform to Open Science. So they had some principles there, and their focus really was on how to change. It was more of a practical definition of open science. And then we've worked with other institutions like the Center for Open Science, which I like their sort of simplified definitions, which is transparency, sharing, inclusivity. So lots of different themes, but open research is, I guess, a broader set of principles than open access.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. That's a great description. I think also maybe simply is open access is the end product, I guess, and then open research is sort of the process by which that product is made, I suppose. Actually, I want to pitch this over to Emily and Natya as well. I mean, from a libraries and librarian's perspective, are you sort of dealing with that sort of nomenclature as well, or I imagine you're kind of coming at this, or Emily maybe used to, but for you, in sort of a much more focused way, not looking at it so much as broadly maybe as a publisher would?
I would say that we are using that broad definition
Okay.
of what that is. And I think there's a long history of libraries working with faculty to support open research. And this really starting with content. So if we take the open access, libraries have always advised faculty on publishing open access or meeting OA requirements from funders, identifying appropriate repositories, and helping to create institutional policies around author rights and publishing access. So many institutions will have an OA policy
Right.
encouraging their faculty to do that. But as libraries move to new purchasing models involving transformative agreements or TAs, libraries are now financially supporting the faculty to publish open access. And the same history of libraries working with faculty on other aspects of open research include efforts around open data, such as meeting journal or funder requirements for sharing data, creating data management plans, assisting with metadata, and identifying or supporting a data repository. And librarians actively work with their research offices in areas around open research, especially as research integrity becomes even more important. I think another key part of this is last year I looked at the number of ARL libraries leading or supporting a digital humanities center on their campus, which was, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say the number because I'm making this kind of up, but it was probably like 95%. And many of these programs involve publications and data. So everything from best practices to visualization and impact. And none of these are brand new programs, but have been around for a while. And open research is a growing part of digital humanities. The other area is libraries are deeply involved in campus efforts around open education research resources, otherwise known as OERs, and work with their provosts or if there's a center for teaching and learning or even statewide initiatives. But I would say that librarians have come a long way in helping authors, starting with the early requirements from NIH's public access policy to becoming more embedded in the research cycle, such as the role that Natya has
Hmm.
at the University of Florida.
Right. And Natya, can you talk about your role in sort of
Sure.
in response to what Emily just said? Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Emily said. At University of Florida, the libraries actually work very closely with the UF Research Office, the Compliance Office, and the Research and Integrity Office. So we closely work with these people and making sure that the researchers have access to these resources, making sure that the research is open research. They have access to publication information. And in terms of more about open research, the libraries actually have support for all of these things that Emily mentioned. We have support for data management plan, we have support for visualization, we have support for making sure that the researchers are submitting their data and their code in the correct repositories as well. So we have support for all of these places. Whether or not the researchers are utilizing these libraries, that's up to them for sure.
Hmm.
But I think we are making sure that our services are widely advertised, or making sure that researchers are actually taking advantage of that as well.
Right. So there is some specific outreach that you do to help them
Oh
be
yeah,
aware
absolutely.
of it. Yeah, yeah. Emily, I just want to go back to you real quick. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, I don't know if there's a there, but how how open research is catching on in the humanities field. Like what, yeah, because there's always been this discussion around of like open access and open research and how that works in the humanities. It just seems there's a lot more attention given to the sciences in this area than the humanities. I'm wondering if you could describe that connection.
Sure. I will preface this by saying that I've spent a lot of my time in my career working in the health sciences, so I'm still coming up to speed on the humanities. But I think that's one of the things I love about working at Taylor and Francis, where our portfolio is largely the humanities and social sciences, because I think that they're great challenges. And I would turn back to my experiences working with Natya at the University of Florida, and that you have the haves and have nots
Hmm.
of the university. And so when we think about publications or even data, um, a lot of researchers can turn to their grants to support the costs around open research. But when you look at the faculty, say, for example, in the arts and humanities, it's more challenging because they can't turn to those grant dollars, or they don't have the infrastructure within their college's research area to support their technology needs and things like that, say, compared to a college of medicine or even something as large as the College of Engineering. And so I think that's where there's a key role for publishers who support the humanities and social sciences to really kind of step in and provide assistance.
Hmm.
And also kind of looking at what those publishing outputs are. And so books, for example, is very important in the humanities.
Right.
So how can we support that? And then also looking at it from a global perspective,
Hmm.
and sharing just all the rich information that is happening, and how can we do that in a more equitable way. So I would say that the other thing too, just in what I've noticed, in terms of differences is it's maybe a little bit more of a cautious approach, simply because some of that content, they may want more copyright restrictions and things like that, just because of the nature of their work. And we
Exactly.
certainly see this with AI and some of the interviews that we conducted at UF, and how do we support integrate that work and then make it available.
You just heard from Natya Hans, Informatics and Reproducibility Librarian in the Academic Research and Consulting Services Department at the University of Florida, Emily McElroy, Vice President of Academic Relations at Taylor & Francis, and Jamie Hutchins, Director of Open Research Americas at Taylor & Francis. This episode was brought to you with generous support from Taylor & Francis. Join us next week when we talk about the ways in which open research is impacting the research ecosystem and what exactly reproducibility is. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising director, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant, Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.